With the 2022 football season right around the corner, we will begin our positional preview series beginning with the quarterbacks. On today's episode of the show, let's get right into it.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I alluded to, we will begin our series where we will go position by position and preview each positional group ahead of the 2022 football season opener, which will be in early September. But it's never too early to start, especially with no other sports going on. We will begin this series by discussing the quarterbacks, starting out with what Malik Cunningham needs to improve on and what to expect from the veteran signal caller in his final year with the Cardinals program. We will then transition into answering the question, where does he rank in terms of the ACC tier list? And then finally, to wrap up the show, we will discuss the backup quarterback options for the Louisville Cardinals. So not really much debate in this one. This is one of those position groups that's been pretty much decided for the past couple seasons with Malik Cunningham and that continuity that the Cardinals have had at quarterback for the past couple of seasons, which is obviously great, especially with a veteran group coming back as a whole, a good amount of starters, but it all starts with senior quarterback Malik Cunningham. So really the question now becomes, what is to be expected? Where does he need to improve his game in terms of certain areas as we look toward this season? And I think it's kind of a loaded question in a couple different senses because Malik Cunningham is not your typical quarterback. People will try to not necessarily, negate everything that he's doing, but try to almost downplay it a little bit because the passing numbers aren't necessarily on par with some of the other quarterbacks in the country, like Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, even some quarterbacks in the ACC like Devin Leary, Sam Hartman, Tyler Van Dijk. The list goes on. But Malik Cunningham is special in his own right. He is one of the best and most dynamic dual-threat quarterbacks in the country. And when you look at what he did last season, nearly 20 passing and 20 rushing touchdowns is absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, it seems like that's kind of what people, college football analysts, hold against him because the passing numbers aren't necessarily ones to, marvel at. Last season, completed 62% of his passes, career high 2,941 yards, had 19 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, was sacked 20 times, had a rating of 150.4. But overall, in his career, Louisville has not passed the 25 touchdown mark. He did cut down on interceptions from the year prior in 2020 in more games, which is pretty solid. Last season completely blew his rushing numbers out of the water. Rushed for over 1,000 yards, 1,031 to be exact, averaged 6 yards per carry, had 20 touchdowns on 173 attempts, was in the top 10 in rushing yards in the country, regardless of position. So that kind of shows you, just how dynamic of, a runner he was when he took the ball and decided to take it for himself. So the main question becomes now, well, what do the Cardinals need to see from Malik in year, I forget what year this is. I think it's year 6. Is this going to be year 6? I think he came in the 2017, right? So 2017, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, so this is his final year of eligibility, I do believe. Regardless, it's either year 5 or year 6. I apologize for not knowing which one it is. But either way, I think that in terms of improvement, a lot of it is just kind of continuing what he's doing, continuing how he's improving, and just adding on. When you look at last season, to start out the year, he looked a little flustered, especially in that game against Ole Miss. to where he was maybe, trying to make his reads a little bit too quickly. He was kind of over-analyzing the defense, making the wrong reads. As the season went on, however, it just goes to show you why you can't, try to make the ship sail after week one because of how Malik Cunningham was able to improve, each and every week. And I think by the end of the season, he was playing some of his best football outside of the games against Kentucky and Air Force. But ultimately, Malik Cunningham was continually impressing me throughout the season, improving as a passer. We know how dynamic he is on the ground. Strictly from a passing standpoint, when you look at terms of areas of improvement, I think that, like I mentioned, decision making continues to be, I think, the telltale sign of success for Malik. And that's just deciding when to throw the ball out of bounds and scrap the play and not try to force something, out of nothing, to where you're prone to maybe making a mistake. Continually improving that deep ball accuracy. I think the accuracy in the intermediate routes. However, we did see some times over the middle to where, he just flat out missed some guys over the middle, threw some guys, airmailed a couple other receivers. But nobody's perfect. I know not everybody's going to put the ball in the money at all times. I'm just kind of nitpicking at the moment. But when we talk about terms of improvement and stuff like that, I think it's a valid thing to say is just continuing to get better in all facets of being a true quarterback. We saw Malik Cunningham's name thrown around in first-round consideration in a CBS mock draft that we broke down here on the Locked On Louisville podcast. And it basically said, it's all about, him being dynamic as a runner and as a passer, but for him to get to that next level and be a starting quarterback in the NFL and continually to get better in college and help Louisville to get better, I think that the most progression obviously has to come as a passer. Now, for starters, as a runner, I think that he's doing what you were expecting him to do. He's making some very good decisions on the read options, and especially in the Satterfield offense. That's exactly what you're looking to see. I think that he is eliminating, a good amount of the mistakes that he made in year prior to where he tried to force something out of nothing. We saw some turnover issues. Now he's going down a lot quicker. He's going, out of bounds a lot quicker, and really avoiding hits. And for a quarterback that maybe not necessarily has had too many issues with the injury bug, because I don't think he misses a lot of games, but throughout the game, he gets some nagging injuries that takes him out for some plays. And we saw that in the 2020 season, the COVID shortened year, to where, even 2019, Evan Conley had to come in for a good amount of snaps because Malik was hurt at times. And I think that was one of those things, trying to avoid unnecessary contact. And he's done that. He did that last year. And I was very impressed with him running the football. And we saw how deadly he can be on the ground. Over 1,000 yards as a quarterback is an incredible feat. So, but as a passer, like I mentioned, being able to, identify defenses and just continuing to, internalize defensive coverages. And I think that, this is a solid opportunity here for Louisville offensively, because you have a veteran quarterback that knows this offense, that knows what Scott Satterfield wants to run, has the talent at running back and wide receiver, has a very good group in the trenches coming back, has Marshawn Ford, the best tight end in the ACC, returning. So, for me, that this is kind of a show me year for the Louisville Cardinals. I think that this is one of those where it's like, okay, you brought all these pieces back. Now, what are you going to do with it? And I think that it all begins with Malik Cunningham. What is the improvement, level going to look like? What are we going to see in terms of progression? Are we going to see Malik look more like a traditional pocket passer, to where we see him, test his arm a little bit more? Are we going to see more of the same, to where Scott Satterfield tries to, still incorporate the read option? It's a run-heavy offense anyway, so it's kind of one of those where we'll see last year. Maybe we don't necessarily see the jump, a meteoric jump in numbers, per se, passing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not improving as a passer. I want to see the completion percentage go up, the turnovers continue to go down. I think it's just going to be about passing the eye test as well, because I don't think that statistics really tell the true story in this respective offense and stuff like that when you consider how much the Louisville Cardinals run the football. But at this point, I want to see Malik Cunningham get better on the deep throws, just continue to work on his accuracy, in the middle of the field, show the willingness to check down to the running backs outside in the pocket and check down to his his wide receivers in certain situations, and just overall improve as a decision maker and do better about making reads, making him that much quicker and making decisions very snappily, and trying not to be hesitant in the pocket. That's kind of where all the progressions come from. But I do think that this is going to be a very, very solid year for Malik. This is a money year, so to speak, for Malik Cunningham. But it really kind of begs the question, looking ahead to 2022, where does Malik Cunningham rank in terms of the ACC tier list? There's a lot of solid signal callers in the Atlantic Coast Conference. We will answer that question here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given Coconut Brownie Chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right. The Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar flavor you love is now a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious, just like all Built Bar products, which are, yes, you guessed it, covered in 100% real chocolate. They are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs the more efficiently and provides a ton of healthy benefits. Eat something that tastes good, but is also good for you. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's using the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Cardinal fans, I want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you individually and collectively for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Do yourself a favor, however, make sure you check out all of our our audio streaming services. Check it out on YouTube. Also, tonight, the NBA Draft, one live NBA Draft show is not enough for Locked On. The entire NBA Draft channel is going live tonight. So if you have a favorite NBA team, make sure you subscribe now to their Locked On YouTube channel so you get notified when they go live on NBA Draft night. I will definitely be tuned in to Jackson Gatlin, the host of Locked On Rockets, tonight, as my Houston Rockets currently have 3 first-round picks, so be sure to check that out. But moving along, talking about Malik Cunningham, the Louisville quarterback's positional preview. The ACC really is full of a lot of quality quarterbacks, some that have already distinguished themselves in years prior, others that are looking to make comebacks, and a solid group that is looking to make strides forward. The question becomes, where does Malik Cunningham rank in the ACC? There are a handful of quarterbacks. I accept a lot of different answers. I'm kind of seeing him anywhere from the 4 to 8 range. I think 8's very, very low considering what he's done here at Louisville. Even like 6 and 7. I think anywhere under top 5 is really doing a disservice to the Louisville signal caller. I think Malik Cunningham is squarely in the top 5 of the ACC quarterbacks ranking in the tier list. I think really, it's kind of hard to deviate tiers because I think that there's just a bunch of quarterbacks that are kind of all in this mesh to where there's not necessarily one that's stepping out more than the others. Kind of talking about the other 5, one of them is Devin Leary from NC State. Had a very, very big season last year. They were very solid. They're going to contend for the ACC title this year. He decided to come back. Had 3,500 yards passing, 35 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. He had second in the conference in quarterback rating, 163.1. So they, NC State has to, see what their answers are at running back. But I do think that it's going to be a very solid year for Devin Leary. Another quarterback is Sam Hartman, who, according to many, is the top quarterback returning in the ACC. Wake Forest made the ACC title game last season. It was a Demon Deacon offense that scored over 40 points per game. He had over 4,200 yards and nearly 40 touchdowns. He had 363 yards on the ground, 11 touchdowns. on the ground as well. So you look at it, and he had 50 touchdowns overall, third in the ACC in total offense, 327.9 yards per game. So it's not a hot take to say that Sam Hartman definitely could be the best quarterback in the ACC next season. Obviously, we talk about Malik Cunningham. Another quarterback to go with is Tyler Van Dyke. D'Eriq King had a season-ending injury last season, and insert Tyler Van Dyke kind of struggled early on, but finished the season with nearly 3,000 passing yards and 25 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions in that time frame, 9 yards per attempt, and over 300 yards in each of his last 6 games. They do have a new quarterback down in Coral Gables. I'm a new head coach and coaching staff down in Coral Gables, so it'll be interesting to see what does the what does the overall style look like for Tyler Van Dyke down in the Hurricanes program this year. But I do think he's primed for a solid season. And the last one that people are kind of talking about in the top 5 is Brennan Armstrong for Virginia. New coach in Tony Elliott. There's no Bronco Mendenhall, but Tony Elliott is heralded as one of the best play callers in the ACC. Last year, Armstrong was the best in terms of total offense, 427.3 yards per game in a Virginia offense that very heavily featured the pass. He had 40 overall touchdowns. 40 of the 52 were from the passing area. Our team's going to be able to figure out excuse me. Our team's going to be able to figure out Brennan Armstrong a little bit more this year, considering you have another year of film. Excuse me. That's still kind of yet to be seen. But overall, that's kind of the top 5, in my opinion. According to Athlon Sports, that's the top 5 there. I think that if you had to kind of go about it, I think that Sam Hartman and Devin Leary are number 1 and 1A here. Or I'm sorry, 1A, 1B. And then Tyler Van Dyke, Brennan Armstrong, Malik Cunningham are kind of in the 2A, 2B, 2C category. I don't feel comfortable enough, kind of separating that into tiers per se, because I think that it's just very, very close. It's not like one is, extremely better than the other. Outside, or others, I should say, it's multiple quarterbacks. Outside of those, you have Phil Yurkovec from Boston College, DJU from Clemson, Jordan Travis, Florida State, and Kadon Slovis from Pittsburgh. Those are kind of in their own 4, and then the rest of the quarterbacks following them. So it's really hard to answer the question, because it's going to really depend on who you talk to when it comes to Malik Cunningham, right? As I mentioned in the last segment, the key is when you talk about Malik Cunningham and what his progression is going to look like in 2022. Sorry. As I was saying, when you look at what his progression looks like in 2022, people will sort of discredit the impact that Malik Cunningham is having. They did it last season because the passing numbers are down. So you look at it and you're thinking, okay, well, how can Malik Cunningham be a top 2 to 3 quarterback in the ACC if he has yet to throw for over 22 touchdowns in his career? That is a valid point. I will say that, it's kind of, you have to take everything in terms of a whole, kind of a big picture type of thought, because of what he's able to do in terms of, a dual threat, what he, doesn't have or lacks in his quarterback passing stats. Well, the guy had 20 touchdowns on the ground and over 1,000 yards. So another 2020 season, I mean, that's going to be hard to try to look somebody in the face and tell them that Malik Cunningham is not a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. Most Louisville fans will arguably say that he's higher than number 5, and probably, give me as much crap as they will, because they think that Malik Cunningham is too low on this list. I saw where he was ranked is like a preseason all ACC 4th team. I mean, this is not a slight to Malik Cunningham. This is no disrespect to him. I think that he is going to have a phenomenal season. I think that if any of these top 5 quarterbacks has the most room for an incredible jump between last year and this year, it is Malik Cunningham because of the possibility and the growth in the passing game that I think Malik is going to see. Don't take this as me thinking that Malik is just kind of a middle of the pack passer, that he's not one of the most valuable quarterbacks in the ACC. When you talk about most valuable players in the ACC, Malik Cunningham is like top 2, top 3, with Brennan Armstrong and Malik Cunningham and maybe Sam Hartman. But even then, it's kind of hard. But we're talking about quarterbacks, and that's where you have to give some flowers to some of the other quarterbacks in this conference, because there are some very, very solid quarterbacks. Sam Hartman and Devin Leary are going to have both of their teams hunting for the ACC, for an ACC championship bid. Brennan Armstrong is one of the best, throwers in the country. And then you have a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, who's going to have a very solid season as well. So for me personally, Malik Cunningham is squarely in the top 5. Where at in that top 5 will depend on his progression as a signal caller for this upcoming season. So into the final segment, we will talk about the backup position and whether or not it is truly up in the air. If you're listening to this on any streaming service, I appreciate you all for listening. You're going to take this time now to hear some incorporated advertisements, so stay tuned. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously you will not, so take that into consideration. And now into the final segment of the show. Unlike some other positions that are going to be in this preview series, there is not a lot of competition in the grand scheme of things outside of the starting job. But the backup position, I don't necessarily think that it is completely sold. You have 3 in contention: Brock Domann, Evan Conley, Khalib Johnson. Conley and Domann last year both got snaps, especially when Malik Cunningham went out, most notably in the game against Clemson. Outside of 2019, however, Evan Conley, when his number has been called, really just kind of hasn't, really separated himself and taken advantage of the opportunity. I know he's been battling some injury, though, so, you have to take that into consideration. Brock, on the other hand, the last year was his first year in the program, didn't get a lot of opportunity, so you can make the case that it's kind of hard to really, leave your mark when you're not getting a ton of first-team reps, and that is very, very true. But at the end of the day, you also can play the devil's advocate by saying you have to be ready whenever you get thrown into the game. That is also very true. So 2 things can be true at one time. I think heading into fall camp, you're probably going to see a depth chart somewhere like Malik Cunningham, Evan Conley, Brock Domann in that order. Khalib Johnson will probably be on the outside looking in. I would imagine this may possibly be a redshirt season for him. But I do think Khalib Johnson is the X factor in the quarterback room. I think that he has the highest potential out of the 3 backup quarterbacks. The 3-star quarterback from the state of Alabama really had a ton of solid seasons for Clay Chalkville High School in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm going to read what it has listed on GoCards.com. Let's see. And I start with he was named the Rivals Player of the Year last season, the number 27 player in the state, passed for 5,478 yards and 72 career touchdowns in his time in high school. 2-time team captain, selected all conference as an all-state appearance, selected runner-up for Mr. Football in Alabama, named the Birmingham Athlete of the Week after leading his school to the state title game, named MVP of the game. Going on last season, 7271 yards, 40 touchdowns, had over 3,000 total yards and 31 touchdowns. Obviously, I think as a signal caller, he really. I'm impressed by his arm strength. I think his footwork is pretty solid as well. There's obviously not much tape from like the offseason and stuff like that, but watching him play in high school and his huddle highlights, it's not hard to come away impressed by what you see on film from Khalib Johnson. I think that he's kind of the X factor. I'm interested to see what impression he leaves in fall camp. I'm interested to see what the health is looking like for Evan Conley, Brock Domann, Khalib Johnson. But the main thing for the Cardinals is making sure that, Lord forbid, Malik Cunningham does get banged up in 2022, but you have to prepare for the unexpected in any aspect of sports. So having a capable backup that can come in and win you football games like Evan Conley did in 2019 is the name of the game for Scott Satterfield, Lance Taylor, and Pete Thomas. So I think that, the backups at Louisville, I think any of those three can come in and win the Cardinals a ball game if need be. But I think it's about coming in and staying confident, being confident in your reads, and just overall seizing the opportunity. We've seen in the past decade for this Louisville program, backups coming in at the most inopportune times and just absolutely flourishing. So I would expect Evan Conley to probably be the backup again. Brock Domann is definitely going to be in the picture, but don't take your eye off Khalib Johnson, because he definitely could make things interesting in the offseason heading into fall camp. So quarterback position is pretty straightforward. Malik Cunningham coming back for his final season here in the program, looking to leave his mark on college football, and obviously the backup quarterback role is up for grabs. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the first picks of the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft have been made. I know the draft is tonight, but while you're waiting, search now for Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders, the Odyssey Sports experts, the draft experts of Locked On NBA Big Board, and more. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen today. But that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here